Now it's time to build the face frame. We want to cover up all this particle board and so forth, the solid wood. We want to build it back out so it's even, so we have a nice face frame on here. Here's the math behind face frames. Every piece on a face frame standard is 1.5 in my class. So we do all of them 1.5. There are rare occasions, sometimes there'll be bigger ones in the middle, sometimes bigger ones at the top, but they're all going to be noted on the plan. In this case, just for simplicity's sake, everything is 1.5. Now that already being said, we always want to build our face frame just a little bit wider than we actually need. 1/8 of an inch on both sides. We do that so that we can later take a router and just shave it off, and now it's perfect on the edge. That way we're guaranteed it's going to be flush. If you build it exact, like I said a couple times, the math says one thing, but reality says something else. Your project is the reality that we need to deal with. At this point, it sounds strange, but I usually will take my drawings and plans and I will throw them in the trash. Now that the carcass is here, this is my reality. This is now what I have to measure from. All right, so to get that extra 1/8 of an inch, all I do is instead of making these two pieces 1.5, I make them 1 5/8. That extra 1/8 of an inch is what I want on the outside. But when I measure everything else, I have to assume it's 1.5. So let me go through the process. The simplest ones are the verticals. So this one is 36 bottom to top, and I know it needs to be 1 5/8 wide. So I just mark it down on my paper, 2 pieces, 1 5/8 by 36. Okay, so those are on. This top and this bottom are going to be the same, 1.5 by something. I measure from side to side and I get my measurement. I have about 48 1/4. It's a little bit bigger than what I wanted. That's simply because I didn't sand these down to 3/4. That's all right. I don't mind if it's a little oversized. So I have 48 1/4, but I need to subtract the ideal measurement from these. These are ideally are 1.5. So 48 1/4 minus 1.5 twice would be 45 1/4. So now I write that down. 2 pieces, 1.5 by 45 1/4. All right, so I now have the outside done. Now what I do is I make the 4 outside pieces and I put them together with pocket screws. Then I deal with the ones in the center. Now, I still want to build them all, but I don't want to make these exact until I know what they actually are. So what I mean, I'm going back to that ideal, realistic and ideal math and the difference. So I'm still going to measure inside to inside. I've got 31 1/4, so I'm going to make that 32 by 1.5, and we write that down. It's about 1.5 inches longer than I need, and that's fine. I just want them there to exist so that I can cut everything and plane everything and sand everything the same. Then I can put it in. These right here, the shelves, let's make them 24. 24 should be well oversized by the 1.5, and I need 3 of those. So now it's 3 pieces, 1.5 by 24. That should be all my face frame pieces. Now once you're done getting them on your paper, go and mill them down. Cut them out on the saw, joint the edges, cut them to width. The only ones you want to cut the length though are the outside ones. Those I know are precise and exact. And then we'll start going inward from there. This is one of the very few times that we actually run pieces through the planer before we assemble them. Whenever you're doing a panel or even a cope and stick joint for a door, I don't plane any of that stuff. You want to keep them really thick. Because these are face frames and we're screwing them together and we can get them pretty close, planing them first saves you time later at the sander, the white belt sander, so you're not stuck there having to sand them over and over again and get them to the proper thickness. Remember that you only plane them once on each side down to 13/16, which is that red bar. So as soon as you hit that bar, that's it. Once on each side, and then you're ready to move on.
Take both your top and bottom pieces to the pocket hole machine and bore holes in both sides. Remember that you need to cut 2 holes, one pulled to the left, the other pushed to the right. Do that on both ends.
I now have all of my face frame pieces cut, and remember that some of them are still rough length. The ones on the outside are exact. So what I need to do, before I can screw anything together, I need to figure out where these shelves are, at least on this piece and on this piece. Then I can get the 4 outside ones put together. Then I'll start worrying about where the center is and the rest of them. So you take your piece, put it on the outside and flush with the outside edge. There we go, and just hold it in place. And take a pencil, sharper is better. So sharpest pencil you can get, and mark along the top edge of each shelf. So here's the top, and I mark here, and there, and one for the bottom right there. That gives me all the marks where the face frame goes from that line down, and I put an X under each of those lines to remind me that the face frame is flush with that line going down. And then of course one at the top to remind me that's the top one. So repeat that same process for the other side, which is just top and bottom. Top one's easy, it's flush with the top. The bottom one is right there. So there's my line. And then I just simply put an X right there on it so that I know that's where it goes. Here at the face frame table, sometimes it can be kind of tricky knowing how to line things up, especially if you have a project that isn't a mirror image of itself, left and right. In other words, mine has drawers on the left and doors on the right. But when I build the face frame, remember, you're looking at the back of the face frame. It's got to be reversed. So the lines I drew for all those shelves a second ago, they're here on my right. But when I was drawing them, they were on my left. So make sure that you put it in here correctly. Otherwise, you're just going to have it backwards. You'll have to pull it all apart and start over. So the bottom plunger here is usually in the right place. If you need to move any of the plungers, simply on the right side of this, and I know it's covered, unscrew it and then I can move it up and down. Unscrew it and I can move it down. This top one, I'm just going to bring it down close to the top of that. That's about right. It doesn't have to be perfect, just close to what you need. But I always put it below the line. Wherever the lines are I have on there, the plunger's just below the line. That's ideal. So slide it into place, and this is your chance to get this as close as possible. This is not a time to say that's close enough. This is where you need to have it as perfect as you can. That's why we drew the lines on there in the first place. That's ideal. That's where the board is. That's where I want my face frame to go. If it's a little too high or a little too low, it just makes a mess. And it's other things that we need to fix later. The screws and the drill, of course, are here. And you just put in your screws and start assembling your face frame all the way around the outside. Now the top one goes flush with the top, and I'll put that in just a second.
Once your bottom piece is in, put the top piece in and line it up perfectly along the top edge. Put in your 2 screws and then move back to the other side, repeating the exact same process, putting your bottom in first and then your top. Make sure everything is lined up perfectly.
Now we need to do the center mullion. So now that I've got my face frame, I put it on here and it's kind of leaning against it. Just shove it up against it and put it so the overhang is about the same top and bottom, roughly. And your best guess is going to be good enough. That's about right. Okay, so that's centered there. Take that same sharp pencil and I'm going to mark both sides of the divider. I'm going to center the bottom and I'll mark where that is as well, just here on the top side, center, center. Now you decide where you want the center to go. If I had 2 open doors, open and open, I would center that exactly on the money. And that would be simple. Just now I have my mark, center it, it's in, it's done. But since I have drawers over here, and I know I need this flat space to be flat all the way past the face frame, I'm going to put the mullion flush with this side. It means I'll have more overhang over here, but that's okay. It's an open door, it doesn't matter. It just depends on the situation. So you decide whether centered or flush to one side or the other, completely up to you. To save myself some time later when I do drawers, I know that flushing this side up will make it so I don't have to make fillers later. I will on this side no matter what. We'll get to that another time. But the other part is, now that this is established, measure the distance from here to here. Now if I measure here, if either one of these boards bows in either direction, the measurement will be off. I need to measure where it can't bow, where it cannot move, so here or on the other end. So now I simply measure from here right where the screws are, and I do have 30.5, maybe just a hair less than 30.5. This is where we get into making it very exact to your particular project, to your needs. If anything is off a hair, we'll at least be able to keep it straight. So when I shove that in, this doesn't bow up or curl down. So I'm going to cut that piece to my just a hair less than 30.5, and we'll stick it in the center and screw it in.
Once the center mullion is in, take your face frame back to your project and mark where the tops of each of the shelves are on the other side. Once you have those marked, take a tape measure and measure exactly what that length is so you can cut all of your face frame pieces correctly. Now it's time to assemble the rest of the face frame. Put each piece in and lock in one side, but don't worry too much if you can't get both sides on the line. You're only worried about the part that's the plunger is going on to. Make it perfect and then screw every one of them in. Once you have that side in, slide it down and make sure each piece is on the line, as close as you can get it. Next, take your face frame to the wide belt sander, set it up, and run it through. Something this big, you need to make sure that it stays on the conveyor belt. So I'm looking on the left side to make sure it lines up with the conveyor. Run it through as many times as it takes so that all the joints are flat.
Take your face frame and put it on. Whether vertical or down on its back, it doesn't matter. Check the fit. I do have some overhang on both sides. It's flush here where I wanted it and flush where these three are. Now, it's not perfect. That's okay. We're looking for really close. Now, if it's way off, like 1/8 of an inch or more, you might want to think of redoing it or moving some pieces around if you can. Otherwise, ask me and let's see what we can do. But if you're happy with the fit, it's time to attach it. Let's put some glue on. Be careful. Some of these glue bottles have really wide mouths, and so when you drip it on there, there's a ton that'll go on. You put on too much, and it's just going to dribble down the side when I put the face frame and squeeze it. So you want enough to do the job, but not so much you got to clean it up after. If it does squeeze out and dribble down, quickly get a paper towel. I mean, you can nail it on, but then immediately go get a wet paper towel and scrub it. And not a dry one. A dry one will actually make it worse because you're moving it around to a bigger area. The water dissolves the glue, and so wet paper towel will do the job. Put a line along every area. Now carefully put your face frame in place. Start with a corner. That's about right, and then set it on. What I'm hoping not to do is put it on and move it a lot. That'll either squeeze the glue out or at least it'll make a bigger mess than you want. Now here's the order. Make sure you've got overhang left and right. I do. Make sure it's flush on the ends. Okay. All right, so that's good. And I go here. This will be covered with base trim. That's why I like to put my first nail there. And then work your way across. So I do the center and then the other end. Now the other end is down a lot. I actually have to lift it up. I don't know if you can see that flexing. Your boards will flex. So lift it into place, force it to go into the place you want it to go. And there. So now the bottom is correct. I'm gonna put a few more nails in it. Make sure it doesn't move around. Okay, so now the bottom is on and it isn't moving anywhere. Now I go to the opposite side. Now that the bottom is stuck, it isn't moving, now I take the top and flex it. I have a lot of overhang here and almost none here. So I flex it over just a little so I get what I need. There we go. And then tack that in. Once that corner's in, the other one isn't ever going to move. And now work your way across. Now we just fill in. The side isn't going to move. I do check it because I can flex a little, but that's fine. Be careful not to shoot so close to the edge that it pops out, because when I run a router along it, I don't want to hit that nail. Okay, these are done. Get the other edge. That looks pretty good. And now we just fill in the rest. Your face frame is now attached. Now go and putty each hole, sand the whole face down so it's nice and smooth, and go ahead and shave off the edges with the router. You can either do that before you sand or after, it doesn't matter. But shave everything off nice and smooth, and then we're ready for the next step.
When you're using the router to hack off the outer edge of your face frame, make sure to go in a counterclockwise direction. Looking down from the top, it's counterclockwise. Do one edge, and then flip around to do the other edge. Now take the time to do a good job putting wood putty in all the nail holes, along all the edges, and any gaps between your project and the face frame. This is something you do not want to procrastinate to the end, because it will save time later. After your putty is all dry, sand everything down nice and smooth. Again, this is rough sanding with a rough sandpaper. You'll go back with finer later.